In this lesson, we'll look at some of the options that we have for adjusting our paint layers in Mudbox. So inevitably, we'll create our paint layers and then we'll realize, well, we want to make some modifications to the layer. We don't necessarily want to repaint it. Maybe we just want to shift the hue, or we want to darken or lighten some of the areas of our texture. Well, there are a number of ways that we can do this. So let's concentrate here on our base. Let's actually turn off the spots for now. If you want to, you can turn off the back color as well. But let's say that for our base color, we want to actually darken or lighten some of these areas. Well, we can come down to our paint tools, and we have a number of image adjustment tools that are available. Starting here at blur and going over to the right, we've got dodge, burn, contrast, sponge, hue, hue shift, and invert. And so blur is pretty self-explanatory. You can come in and actually blur the color detail. Okay. Dodge will lighten up areas, so you can use with dodge and come in and you can see we can affect the midtones, highlights, or shadows. We can change the exposure, also the size and strength, just as we would with any other brush. We have mirroring available, and we can also use a stamp. So in this case, I can come in and let's change our brush size down, and I can maybe dodge in here to kind of lighten up this area of the head. Okay, and then I can come in and burn by holding down Control. I can darken up areas, so we can do it that way if we want, or we can choose burn here and come in and start to darken up areas. Okay, and burn those in. So this is another nice way of getting some variation into your texture really quickly, just kind of dodging and burning to add a little bit of that organic variation in there, so it's not completely just one color. Okay, so that's dodge and burn. We can also use contrast to increase the contrast here, or decrease the contrast, holding down Control. Using sponge will remove saturation. So we can come in here, can take some of the saturation out. You may be able to see this a little bit better on something like the back color. We can kind of desaturate that. Okay, we can also, if we want to come in back here, dodge this lower portion out, just kind of lighten that up a little. Come back in here and maybe burn in some of these areas. Just to add a little bit, again, of variation, which will help us create a nice organic look to our texture. And so these are good for coming in and adjusting your paint layers, texture that you've already painted, based on a specific area. So just, continuing to paint through this. But and so we also should mention first is that we have the ability to change the hue. I want to touch on. So if we want to change the hue of this, we can come in and you can see it's very subtle on these, but you can see how that's shifting the hue to that red. We can also shift the hue based on the angle around the color wheel if we want to do that. So we can come in here and set an angle here for shifting and come in, and you can see how that makes it a little bit more blue. But this is all based on our brush strokes. So it's based on, we have to go in and actually paint that through. What happens if we want to actually adjust a texture as a whole? Well, we can do that also by either coming in here and choosing adjust color, or we can right click on our paint layer that we want to adjust and come into adjust color. This will give us our adjust color window. And now we have some HSV sliders and also some curves that we can manipulate. So the HSV sliders are pretty straightforward. I can adjust the hue by coming in here and sliding to the left or right. Okay. I can also adjust the saturation. So you can see what happens when I increase that saturation quite a bit. Okay, so probably don't want to have that saturation too high. Okay, you can also take all that saturation out, take all the color out. We can darken everything up a bit by changing the value. Okay, so we can add a little bit of red or purple in there. Okay, I think I want to leave that hue pretty much the same. We can also come into RGB and even isolate that down to R, G, and B value and saturation if we want to change that. And we can change the curve. So if we wanted to go into the blue, we could modify that curve, make it a little bit more, take it a little bit more into the green. Okay. And so this allows us, and we got preview turned on so we can see it happen here. This allows us to come in and modify our paint layers as a whole. We can come into our back color. Let's just say we decide we don't really want that red. We can come in and adjust the color, adjust the hue here, make that purple, blue, whatever color we want. And because that's isolated, it doesn't affect anything underneath. So we could make that kind of blue or green. We could darken it up or lighten it up. Okay, maybe we want to darken it up and take some of the saturation out so it blends in a little bit more. Say OK to that, and we've now adjusted that very, very quickly, very easily. Now, one thing to keep in mind when we're adjusting our colors with these adjustment tools is the fact that when we're painting, we're going to be adjusting. You're going to be adjusting them over the overlapping strokes, basically. So, if we were to come in here with hue, and let's actually shift that, do a hue shift. If we were to come in and shift that hue over here, and then we come back in and paint over it, you can see that the initial stroke shifted this hue, and then when I painted over it again, it shifted this hue to match, but then we went over that original stroke, and so it again shifted the hue. So that's another reason for using adjust colors, is we don't have to worry about that overlapping effect of our strokes. Okay, same thing here. If we were to go in and let's look at our spots. If we were to invert that and then come back in and invert it again over here, you can see how that now inverts it back to the normal. You can really quickly get out of control with what's inverted and what isn't. So that's just something to be aware of when you're doing your adjustments. Okay, we'll take that back down a little bit. All right, so that is those are some of the ways that we can adjust our paint layers. We can use our paint tools down here to do our image adjustment, and then we can also, in 2012, use this great new feature, Adjust Colors, which will allow us to really quickly adjust the individual paint layers on a layer-by-layer basis. So that's a really nice addition and something that will save us a lot of time as well. So the next thing that we want to look at is a really big feature of 2012, and it's going to really be nice for people using a PTEX workflow. And so we'll take a look at what that is and how we can implement that in Mudbox in the next lesson.